right, what's going on, my freaks and geeks? We are the Square Round Table. Tonight, we have some very special guests with us. These guys have their own awesome podcast called Deep Cuts. They're indie comic book creators, and they portray none other than bacon and legs on their award-winning cop drama of the same name. Please give it up for Dave Baker and Andrew Price.
Yo.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate the fact that you led with the indie comics creator and podcast host as opposed to our former acting careers. Most people start with the acting stuff, but Andrew and I were really young when we were on the show, and we're proud of the work we did, but we're really trying to move in new directions. We're trying to accomplish new things. So
more than just bacon and legs.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, well, I definitely understand that, and as a former actor myself, I like to be recognized for what I'm doing right now, not for what I did when I was like 5. So I completely understand what you guys are saying.
Yeah,
110%.
I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that when we were walking down the street, especially together. It happens less when we're by ourselves, but when we're walking down the street, we get a lot of people singing the Bacon and Legs theme song, like a lot, and it's kind of, you're like, okay, I get it, I understand, but I guess that's the price of childhood fame, right?
Yeah,
that's the price of it, exactly. And it's crazy, the theme song's got a lot of profanity in it. So just for 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds singing it, I mean, that's some loyal fanship right there. Like, I wish I had that. So
yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, really surreal. 5-year-old walk up to you and say that you're 2 birds of a motherfucking feather.
Right. Like, that's amazing. I mean, geez. But yeah, guys. So how have y'all been holding up, man? How's everything going?
Fuck these fascists.
Yeah, there's some real. I wanted Dave to go first because I think his thing is simple, but for me at least, and I think Dave, this applies to you as well. But we've talked about how you're holding up with this thing, and I think in general you want things to stop being horrible, and you want to be able to go back out and go to conventions and do all these things that you love doing. And for me, it's a little bit more complicated. There's some cognitive dissonance going on because it's like this year has been like, number one, really weird and surreal, and a lot of really bad things have happened. And I recognize and sort of reconcile with the really bad things that have happened in this year, whether it's the COVID stuff or politically. But also there's like this weird thing where I feel a little bit guilty because, number one, me as a person and just how I am, sort of how sort of introverted I can be, like I've actually really enjoyed like the lockdown and like the situation where not having to go places, and I've enjoyed the time of just kind of being able to be in my house, and I've been a lot more productive. We literally like built this podcast within the COVID pandemic raging. So yeah, it's a weird thing where it's like, man, like this year has really sucked for humanity, but like personally, I've like gotten a lot of stuff done, and I've been more productive, and I've moved forward on a lot of goals that I've had. So I don't really know how I feel about that.
Well, it's also nice for you because I live by myself with just like a bunch of cockroaches and boxes of comics. Andrew, like, he has kids, and, it's nice to see them growing up and experiencing and learning. And like, what do I have to learn? Like, oh man, look, the cockroaches are playing tic-tac-toe. Like, I don't give a shit about that.
You don't care about an advanced race of cockroaches evolving in microcosms within your apartment until the
bro, there's like 2 sects of them. There's like the sect that lives under my bed, and then there's the sect that's in the kitchen, and they're like warring with each other. It's awful. I'm pretty sure there's like intergenerational species beef between the 2 rival gangs. It's awful. It's just terrible.
No, you need to get somebody to come in there and take care of that, because the worst mine do jump off the wall when they see I'm coming towards them.
Exactly. They're just like, oh, we've lived a good life. Let's jump off the wall.
Especially the ones that are like really advanced and learn how to fly.
Oh God.
Flying ones, those are the worst, man. At that point in time, you just leave the house. Just leave the house.
They'll come at you.
Yeah.
We had a really horrible cockroach problem in my first apartment when I first moved to LA. And it was a situation where you just kind of like learned to coexist with them. Like people were so horrified to find out that we had these cockroaches and that they would just be crawling around. But for me, I was just like, I don't know, like we lived here for a year and the landlord wouldn't do anything about the problem. So at a certain point, you just kind of got to be like, just we're doing this. Like these are just our roommates. I'm an animal lover, and I'm not into violence against animals or joking about violence against animals. I don't kill bugs. I put bugs outside. But I got to admit, when we were moving out of this apartment, I took a little dust devil or one of the little handheld vacuums, and I went full saw. I like there was some broken glass that I had vacuumed up, and then I just started vacuuming up cockroaches into this vortex of broken glass, and I got like a huge amount of cathartic release from doing it.
I'm sorry you felt that way. I mean, just to go from somebody that doesn't like harming any animal or any being, period.
I let my baser self come out for
man. I'm a fucking pragmatist. I know how this is. It's me or them. Like I'm out here Gulliver's traveling.
He just doesn't care.
Oh God, die! There's no other option. Otherwise, when I'm in my sleep, I'm gonna wake up tied to the floor with like a little army of them like crawling over my stomach, preparing to do some sort of crazy ritual to extract my heart and eat it.
Oh, I believe with the ones in Indiana Jones.
Gulliver's Travel you read.
Yeah,
that was the director's cut, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So are your roaches at least trained like to where when you have visitors, they're not there, but when they're gone, they're like, yeah, it's time to party, guys, like we can come back
visitors what are those the friends? I don't know.
Right, other people besides comics.
Right.
Nah. The only person I see is Andrew, and then we just see each other over Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's just been kind of crazy, guys. But honestly, I think you'll be surprised because during the time, because we also started the Score Roundtable podcast during the pandemic, mostly because it's something we've been wanting to do for a while, but then also because of boredom. Because it's like, okay, we have nothing else to do, and we also want to connect with other people and be able to talk to other folks. And almost everybody that we've had on the podcast so far says the same thing, that they feel a little bad because, of course, we have the pandemic and everybody getting sick and dealing with, our government and all these sort of things. But they've been able to get so much done because of all of the free time. And also for the people like Andrew, you have, your wife, your kids, and, Dave, you have all your comics and roaches. You get, you have the opportunity.
Tried so hard to make that sound nice.
You really did.
I made it straight.
Yo, you paused. That pause is what did it for me. You paused to kind of like come up with like a way to say it like nicely, and you just couldn't do it.
I wanted to make it sound really sweet, but I guess it just didn't come across that way. But you get a chance to, get to really know your family again and get to not to deal with all the hustle and bustle that you don't realize that you have to go through every day, without a looming pandemic or just being scared to breathe air outside, so yeah, so that's, I guess that's kind of, if you can find, I hate to say almost a silver lining, but that's kind of what that could be looked at as,
No, I completely agree. As much as I'm fucking around and saying I don't have any friends and shit, like obviously that's a joke. Obviously I do. Right, and the time that Andrew and I have spent making deep cuts has just been so fun. Like it's been one of the best things that I don't want to speak for Mr. Price, but for me, it's been one of the best uses of my time in a long time, which is saying a lot because I do a lot of shit. But I love the fact that every Monday we get together and we try and make something new. And that's really fun, especially, I'm a fucking comic book writer and artist. So, I'm working on books for literally years, and just having the ability to put out something every week and to kind of like almost take a personal state of the union has been really like fulfilling emotionally, and also just really fun because been able to attract all of these really cool, like-minded individuals, you know, like yourselves. And it's really cool to see the inside jokes that, because 9 times out of 10, it kind of just feels like Andrew and I are just making the podcast for ourselves. And then I see the numbers on Wednesday and I'm like, oh, this is not just the two of us. but it's still really fun because it's like this little community that is brought into all of the inside jokes that Andrew and I would normally have in real life. Like we used to work together at a media company in an office, and you know, we toned it down a little bit because there were other coworkers, but a large percentage of that was just us fucking around and having running bits. Like there was a while where Andrew he would bring in donuts for everybody in our office, and it would be called an Andrew's dozen, which is, oh God, I can't even remember it now. It's been so long. Yeah, what is an Andrew's dozen, Andrew?
Well, first of all, an Andrew's dozen is a dozen donuts with 3 jelly donuts so that I can have 2 and somebody else can have 1.
And he said that for months, where he would bring in donuts. He goes, guys, I brought an Andrew's dozen, where it's a dozen donuts and 3 jelly donuts, 2 for me and 1 for somebody else if they want one. And I feel a deep sense of shame that I had forgotten that, because that was for, I don't even know, years. It wasn't years, months that happened. And it's that weird little innocuous things that you don't think are funny in the moment, and then over time they just get funnier and funnier. That's kind of how the podcast feels to me, where it started out just as us making a fun explainer show where we just kind of take the audience through a topic and kind of walk you through the nitty gritty so you can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at your next forced social function. And then it slowly turned into this other thing where, like, for the Halloween episode, we did a full-on musical narrative episode, which isn't an explainer at all. And it's just Andrew and I creating this fictional world with all these characters that have appeared in the previous episodes. And Andrew wrote all this original music, which is amazing. And then we sing a duet at the end of the fucking episode where he sings as a demonic puppet and I sing as a ghost of 1970s comedian Paul Lynde. Like, it's so fun to be able to just like have this bizarre infinite canvas that kind of serves as like a weird Vulcan mind meld brain map of the two of us.
No, I mean, it's definitely pretty cool, man. I could definitely say it's hilarious, man. Like, that's definitely what got me hooked on it, because I'm just like looking for episodes every week. I'm like, these guys are pretty cool. Like, me and my brother, which episode do we listen to? It was the hip hop episode about the 2 Scottish guys that pretended to be. Yeah. So it was just like stuff like that, and just things that you don't think about. I'm just like, why don't I know this? You know, so it's ridiculous. Like the guy with the growing a penis on his arm. It's just like, what is that?
Yeah, like that.
Yes.
Like, that's crazy. Like, I was like, he got it on his arm. Like, really? And it's like, and you see the video, and you're just like, oh, it's there. Like, it might be blurred out, but it's there.
Yeah. And he's just taking like a family portrait by a tree with it just it's just like,
and he's just like, you know, this is my life now. This is what I have. And I'm just like, cool. Like,
yeah,
exactly. Like, I think, like, what if it's just like so hot outside and he just can't wear long sleeves? Like, what do you do? Like, wrap it up in like a bandage or something?
You gotta
I just can't. I think he talked about that. He says in interviews that he can't swim in a public pool. He can't like take his shirt off at his house in front of his kids. Like, you just, you know, it's like you can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting. Like, when you said that it just fell off, like when you said that, I'm thinking like it, because I'm thinking like in a cartoon perspective, like it just lopped to the ground. It's like, no, that had to be a slow, painful process of you having that fall off. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
it's awful. Also, just for the listener, if you care, we did an episode about this guy in England named Malcolm McDonald who had a blood infection that caused his fingers and toes to turn black and his genitals to fall off, and he then underwent a an extremely experimental surgery where he had an 8-inch penis grafted and grown on his left arm. And since it's now fully developed and has been fully matured, he was supposed to have a transplant surgery where it would be taken off of his arm and placed onto his groin. However, because of coronavirus and other medical kerfluffles, the surgery time keeps being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And he's now had it on his arm, which was supposed to be, I think, 8 months. He's had it on his arm for 4 years.
That's wild.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that like that just made my day, that he just wanted the extra 2 inches. He was like, yeah, dude, we're going to go for it. Like, I mean,
I would too. I'm surprised it was only 2. If I had my dick fall off from getting infected, I'd be like, fuck it. How much do I have to pay for a 2-foot dick? I don't care. You kidding? Look what I had to endure. It fell off. I'm now just going to have just like an elephant trunk. Let's do this.
Right? You might as well. Like, you might as well. If you're going to go all the way with it, you might as well. If you're going to have it on your arm, you might as well go the full length.
If you're going to be the full arm, if you're going to be in like a cyberpunk dystopian crazy life, body augmentation world, why stop at 8 inches? That's what normal people have. Why not have something that's like 16 inches? That's crazy. Fuck it.
Yeah, dude. Like, you gotta go out, man. If you
I guess, but like, I don't know. It's like you jump, from one problem to another. Like, let's just have some kind of normalcy. Like, now you're not going to be able to use it. So it's like,
no, he does though. But he can't use it. He can use it. He has that little saline pump thing that's going to be installed in him.
Right.
So he'll be able to achieve erections now. Good for you, Malcolm.
Yeah, get back out there.
Whatever his name is. Yeah.
No, definitely. And that's definitely a thing. Because I was, before you even said it, I was like, yeah, the little pump that goes inside the scrotum. Because I've, seen it in like medical videos and stuff like that. I'm like, and that's so bizarre, but it's a real thing. And it's a real surgery. A lot of people get it. So it's, it's definitely something.
Sounds great. I think it's a wonderful world that we live in, where someone who endures the level of tragedy that this poor man has, which under no fault of his own, and then we as a global culture can come together and be like, you want an 8-inch penis on your arm? All right, let's
get you an 8-inch.
Right. You get one. You get one.
Right. Everyone gets it.
Everyone gets one.
Yeah. Like, why wasn't he on Oprah? Why wasn't Oprah just be like, and now everybody in the audience gets a free 8-inch arm penis?
Right. Everybody shouting.
Like, right. Dude, it's like, we don't want a car. Like, who's doing that anymore? Like, put something on my arm.
We talked about that on an episode, on an old episode of Deep Cuts. Like, which one did we talk about it on? We talked about it on the JJ Arms episode. We talked about this idea. I talked about this like idea of like a prosthetic singularity, where like, where's the moment where prosthetics, like mechanical prosthetic limbs, like mechanical, like robot arms, basically, right, when they get so advanced that they start basically looking and functioning like a real hand, where, when you see in a movie how, Luke Skywalker gets his hand cut off and he gets it replaced with a robot arm, but, for the rest of the movie, he's just wearing a glove and it's his real hand. So it looks and functions very naturally because it's a real hand. But within the universe of the movie, the technology is so advanced that it's indistinguishable from an actual hand. Where's the point where we get to that level, to where people start purposely having their arms amputated to get a robot arm?
Yeah, especially
it becomes an elective surgery as opposed to like a life-saving, or like a surgery of convenience.
Well, especially too when you have people who are entering fields of study or work that have extreme needs for dexterity. Like, I'm almost kind of like how Data in Next Generation is always typing and he's like, typing like 7,000 words a minute or whatever. Like, imagine if you were a computer hacker and you needed to be able to type that fast in order to outsmart, predictive algorithms that would see you hacking into fucking, the CIA or whatever. Like, I can totally see stuff like that happening. Oh, I don't know, tomorrow?
Yeah. Basically what I'm saying is, when are we going to start having people one day you're outside and you're walking around and you see a guy who has long sleeves and he has like a lump on his arm, and you're like, oh, he's getting the dick extension. Like,
yeah.
becomes a normal thing.
Yeah. That's like the equivalent of women in LA with the nose shield because they just got a nose job. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
I mean, when it gets to that point, it's just like I'm a big person for like structure and function. You know, it's like I don't really want to see the day where, you know, it becomes the new body art. Like, you know, just I got a brand new tattoo. Oh, look at my arm dick. You know, like that's kinda, I don't want to have that. Or a guy like JJ Arms, who didn't he have like a gun built into one of his hooks?
His prosthetics, yeah. Mm-hmm.
His prosthetic. Yeah, like I don't want that. You go to the doctor, it's like, yeah, I'd like gun arms. Like, why? What do you do for a living? I just want gun arms. I work at McDonald's and I want gun hands. Like, no.
You don't think that conversation is happening right now?
Yeah.
I guarantee you, somewhere in Arizona, there's somebody who's like, I want a gun arm.
I mean, I'm sure, but
Gabe's family members.
Yeah, literally.
Right. I mean, I just think it's gonna like get to a point where the prosthetics are just gonna get where like people are gonna use them for pain and pleasure. Like it's gonna get to a point where prosthetics have like this thing where your prosthetic arm, like if you pinch your finger on your prosthetic like hand, you'll be able to feel it. And people are gonna get into like mutilating the hand so they can just get that feeling of pain and just get the hand put back on.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I am so here for this Clive Barker future. Let's do this.
Yeah, that's something I never considered before, but that's total. I totally think that's viable. This idea of somebody, because you know, there's people who have like psychological issues where like they like think that they should be blind, and there was this famous, well, not that famous. I don't think it was like super well like reported on, but this girl, this teenage girl, she had this psychological condition where she felt like she should be blind, and it was it's like you feel like you're a blind, you identify as a blind person, and her therapist agreed to help her blind herself because she just wanted to be blind. So her therapist poured some kind of chemical solution into her eyes to blind her. And now she's blind, and it's just what she wanted. She wanted to be blind. So you can extrapolate that out and say that, you know, in the future, there might be people who are into, you know, like that person who paid that German guy to eat him that back in the early 2000s.
What?
I think that's an episode of Deep Cuts right there.
Yeah.
I forgot about that guy,
yeah,
but 100% that's an episode.
There was a criminal case in the early 2000s about a German man who tried to he was a cannibal, or he had the urges to be a cannibal, but he wanted to do it legally and ethically, at least according to him. And so he put out an ad on Craigslist that he wanted to kill and eat somebody, and somebody answered the ad, and it was him who wanted to kill and eat somebody, but he wanted to do it in a consensual way. And then it was a person who, I guess, just wanted to die. They wanted to commit suicide, I guess. And and as part of it, they wanted to be killed and they wanted to be eaten. It was like a specific desire that they had. So you can kind of put those two things together, and you can say that, you know, there could be some time in the future where somebody who has some kind of fetish or psychological fixation on mutilation or pain could either mutilate themselves or have an arm amputated and replaced with this prosthetic arm that can feel pain so that they can mutilate themselves over and over again.
Wow. I just want to say, first and foremost, shout out to Craigslist. Like, Craigslist pretty much anything.
You can find all your needs on Craigslist, whatever you find. If you want to eat somebody, you can find that person on Craigslist. And the person who wants that done to them on Craigslist. It's a weird relationship, but it's there.
I would have just wanted to be a fly on the wall for that, like, conversation. It's like, hey, Yeah.
And they met in like a fucking frozen yogurt place. You know what I mean? Like a Starbucks.
Exactly.
Are you John? Yeah, I'm John. I'm the guy who wants to be murdered and eaten.
Oh yeah, Starburst 62. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god.
That story is so. I've been fascinated with that story for years. It's so weird to me.
Yeah.
Like, that somebody would be like, yeah, I just want to be eaten. I want it. Like, my fetish is dying.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's completely bizarre. Like that. I mean, it's just, and that's just something. Another reason why I was interested in you guys' show, because you just see so many, or you don't see them, but there are so many different walks of life out there, and certainly everybody's not that extreme. But it's just surprising how a lot of people just live. You know, in another thing that really is crazy to me is just like celebrity and what people will do just for an ounce of fame, or just how people are unwavering in their pursuit for fame and glory, or just some type of notoriety. Because I wanted to know from you guys, what was, I guess, your most shocking episode? One, because specifically one for me, I want to say it was shocking, but just knowing that this guy existed, and it was more of like a happy episode for me. It was the Laz Rojas. Like I really liked his story, and just like what he did for, I guess, the underground film world. And, just the fact that he didn't really monetarily, I guess, get what he wanted in the end. But I feel like I was happy because of the fact that he found that there was some kind of subgenre of fans that loved what he did. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we did an episode on this filmmaker from the 80s and 90s called Laz Rojas, who is a man who made this thing called One Man Audition tape, and he was a frustrated screenwriter and actor who took it upon himself to make basically it's like a 3-4 hour audition tape where he takes chunks from all of his movies that he wrote, which is like 6 or 8 screenplays of different genres. There's like a romantic comedy one, and kind of like a Porky's-esque kind of coming of age movie, and a Star Trek style movie, and a Western, and all these different things. And he shot on a VHS camera these 4 hours of all of these footage of these scenes of these characters talking. And it's not played for comedy, but he plays every character: the women, the children, the men, people of different ethnicities. Like, it is, to say it's deranged is I think fairly accurate. It's so primally innocent in its modus operandi that it doesn't really take into account that anyone else would think it's bizarre or unconventional in any way. It's almost like if every movie ever made was one guy. Like, it's almost like if the Clumps was the only movie franchise that ever existed, where it's just Eddie Murphy playing every character. And so, like, as you pointed out, we did an episode about him, and we interviewed a documentary filmmaker who had done a piece on him for Vice. And I actually emailed with him pretty substantially. I was trying to get him to be on the show as an interviewee. And ultimately, we kind of, we didn't really connect. And I'm still hoping that someday, or not connect, we did connect. His schedule wouldn't permit him to coming on the show because he was a little bit preoccupied with a legal case, which we kind of got into at the end of the show. I'm still hoping someday to interview him because I'm just a huge fan of his work. And I think it's really impressive that one human being has the stick-to-itiveness to complete that body of work. And it's also, I think, as I was joking around about Andrew and I, how Deep Cuts is like a joint mind map of the two of us. Laz Rojas's One Man Audition tape is a mind map of that person, and it's simultaneously like a primal shriek and a kind of an ovation to the joy of creativity wrapped in itself. It's very, very fascinating.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Oh, go ahead, Dmitri.
Oh, I was just saying, I was impressed by like his dedication, because I couldn't have that dedication to just film every single one of those roles. and what he went through, like after the fact of the matter, like that was just like a lot of craziness then.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you watch, there's a blooper reel for the audition, the 1-man audition or whatever, and it's mostly just honestly, it's not even a blooper. It's not funny. Like I don't know why he put this together and released it, because it's just, it doesn't come off as funny, but it's mostly just him in the throes of making this thing where he's playing every character and coming up with all these convoluted ways of shooting scenes with just him and figuring out ways to get like over the shoulder shots and getting the backs of heads and stuff like that. And it's just him over and over again, just like frustrated and just being like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like just yelling at himself and like being like, why am I doing this? And it's just that over and over again for like, the blooper reel is, I don't know, it's like 30 minutes or something like that. So yeah, we talked about it on the episode, and we also talked about it a little bit on the Act of Killing episode about Joshua Oppenheimer sort of being in the middle of making that without really knowing what the end goal was. But it's less even the work that he put into it, and it's more the fact that the work that he put into it, plus the fact that he literally had no idea or of like where that was going to go. Like it wasn't like he was hired to do that, and it's like, wow, he was hired to make this crazy thing and he did it. Like he made that just on his own with no certainty of it ever going anywhere, of it ever having a positive reception or anything like that. He white knuckled it through that entire thing without any idea of like that it was going to pay off for him at all. And I mean, kind of in the ways that he wanted it to, it didn't. It sort of didn't pay off for him in that way.
Yeah, I thought even that was like really interesting, because just having the stomach just to interview a person of that caliber, like somebody that has committed these awful crimes, and just hearing them hearing them recall it in sort of a, I guess, kind of like a jovial way, and then just having to sit through that. But on the other side of it, I kind of like something that you guys pointed out too, sort of like the psychology of that, and that's kind of like their way of dealing with what they did. So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I think that is kind of that's the thing that I think fascinates the both of us the most about any episode that we do. The Act of Killing episode exemplifies that. It's the most extreme example of it, of just people telegraphing their sort of psychological traumas and the things that have happened to them that have sort of created them as humans, childhood traumas and neuroses and hang-ups and past
cockroach traumas.
Yeah, cockroach traumas. The way that people telegraph those things in their actions and the things that they choose to do with their lives and the art that they make and the people that they form relationships with. That's the death squad leaders in the Act of Killing are like the most extreme example of that. But I think every episode of Cuts is about that ultimately. That's the thing that I think is the most fascinating thing to us.
Yeah, I mean, even just down to the episodes that we've done about subjects that aren't as controversial as The Act of Killing, which is a documentary where this documentary filmmaker, Joshua Oppenheimer, went around Indonesia and interviewed war criminals about the murders that they committed during the Indonesian genocide in 1965. Even in kind of more mundane episodes, I feel like Andrew hit it on the head, where there's something about the human motivation behind things is kind of like the kernel that both of us just kind of naturally are interested in. And so, even in episodes like we did an episode about Hergé, the guy who created the Belgian iconic comic book Tintin. And about his life and the compromises that he had to make in order to make the art that he produced, which has obviously been beloved by people across the globe for generations, and is probably one of the primary reasons why I am a cartoonist, is because of Hergé and Tintin. So much so that the book I'm working on right now is, I'm not going to say it's a send up of Tintin, but it is definitely molded in that, you know, child adventurer, globe-trotting, weird genre mashup style book. And the episode we did about Hergé was all about his time working for the Nazis, and, you know, where's the line between sacrifice and compromise and artistic integrity, and what does it take for an artist to kind of fabricate a reality that actually supports the creation of their work. You know, and that's, and every artist has to reckon with that in some regard. You know, every artist's life revolves around a central theme, which is compromise, unfortunately. But I don't know that most, especially American cartoonists, have to deal with whether or not they're going to be a Nazi. I think it's pretty fucking easy not to be a Nazi. But that just goes to point, you know, I think probably another podcast doing an explainer about the history of Tintin would have focused on like, oh yeah, here's this guy and this is the books and these are what the books are about, where Andrew and I are more interested in, here's this guy, these are the books, and also there's this really weird morally gray area about this individual, and look at how it impacted the work. Like, you know, obviously Hergé's first big breakout book was Tintin in the Congo, which, you know, Belgium was occupying and had the Congo was a fucking colony of theirs, and they were horribly racist, and they would literally cut off the right arms of slaves that they had taken in order to instill fear into plantation workers. And all of that stuff is like kind of in that first Hergé Tintin in the Congo book, just like masked under this weird racist gossamer of like, isn't it awesome? And no, it's not awesome. It's really fucking awful. And so, yeah, I think it's important to have those tough conversations and evaluate artists. I'm not even advocating for like, fuck this, we shouldn't read works by people that are problematic. I'm just saying we should understand the people and then be able to evaluate the work based on that, or have it inform the work and our opinion of it. And maybe there is a line where you think, you know what, I don't think I'm down with fucking Roman Polanski. I don't think I can do it. Or maybe you're like, you know what, that was an isolated incident and the work is the work and I can detach them. But I think that conversation is very interesting and something that Andrew and I have a lot, regardless of the fact that 9 times out of 10, we're almost in agreement on most things. So it's not like we're necessarily debating. It's just almost kind of like taking a you know, order of operations through the kind of emotional weight of these issues.
Yeah, and those are great points you made, and I kind of feel the same way. It just depends. Like a lot of the times, I like to separate the artists from their work. Like if it's something that I digest, or like let's say some music by somebody who might not have been the greatest person, or you know, whatever. Like I know it is kind of I guess like surprising and kind of catches you off guard when you do like somebody and then you find out something about them, you know, later on. Like I kind of, it was sort of the same thing for H.P. Lovecraft, because I love his work, but he definitely, you know, had some problems with racism. So it was just one of those things. When I found that out later on, I was just like, wow, you know, I looked at it a little differently, but in the end, there was work of his that I did enjoy, you know. And you have that story is played over and over again with musicians that do certain things, but it's just, you know, it's just weird, you know. It really is. But I don't think our show is some sort of rallying cry for moral piety or something. I'm just saying that it's interesting how our culture turns a blind eye to some people and not others. And it's also, for me personally, because I kind of almost was built as a human by comics as a medium. As a comic book person, you're always kind of, you obsessively collect a certain person, right? Or if you follow a creator and you at a certain point, you're almost there, not even for the stories, but you're there to see how they problem solved, or at least as a creator, you're like, oh, you know,
look at how Alan Moore used a 9-panel grid this time. He's using it in a different way than he used it last time. Or oh, look how Mike Mignola is rendering feet now as opposed to how he used to render feet. And so that kind of almost using the work to get to know the person, I don't know that many people watch movies that way. I don't know that many people show up to Mission Impossible 17 in order to try and get a better understanding of how Tom Cruise has evolved as a person. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm being an asshole, but that's not my perception of the way things are.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
I think that's the conversation. I think that's the conversation that we had. It's just like, can you separate a person's work from the person? Like, you know, if they make really good stuff, like, are you able to, or is that something you just gotta like throw away? But nobody really wants to have that conversation. They just kind of accept it, or they go, oh, I'll just still listen to their music, or I'll still watch their stuff, but they don't really think about it like that.
Yeah, because
I definitely agree with you.
It's hard. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to be like, hey, Michael Jackson's entire discography, not going to interact with that anymore because it's such a big part of culture.
Right.
But at the same time,
Great example.
I don't even need to say what that guy did. We all know what that guy did.
Yeah.
And it's and like you said, it plays for so many people. Like I had that discussion with my mom not too long ago about it, and it was kind of like in a jokingly kind of way. We weren't really too serious about it, but you know, just taking in just people's content, because I know a lot of people, like I said, Mike, you got your Michael Jacksons and you got your R. Kellys and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you know, their content that they made, and I'm gonna bring it to something else. We, you know, enjoyed it, and I don't really associate with the person, you know, and what they did, because that's, you know, their personal lives. Kind of like, I like when you, Dave, when you were talking about Steve Ditko and the kind of little interaction that you had with him, and even though, you know, he wasn't really the nicest person to you, that you still respected him for his work, and you were still thankful to have that small but, you know, interaction with him, period, you know, because he was that guy for comic books, period, you know. So
yeah, I mean, you're referencing the fact that I exchanged letters with the notorious recluse and hermit Steve Ditko, co-creator of Spider-Man and creator of Doctor Strange and The Question and a bunch of Charlton heroes. Yeah, I was a huge fan, am a huge fan. And while he was still alive, I wrote him letters, and he is a deeply passionate Randian, which is not a worldview that I subscribe to. He also was not enthused about me writing him, and yet every letter I sent him, he wrote back to me, which then made me keep writing him. And it was this very bizarre kind of tete-a-tete that we had, where he kind of every time would just end the letters being like, please leave me alone. And I was like, but you're kind of sort of answering my questions, but not really, but just telling me to leave you alone. Why do you keep writing me? And so we maybe wrote like 3-4 letters back to each other. And then probably about 6 months after that, he passed away. And while I feel somewhat bad that I inconvenienced an elderly man, yeah, I killed him. Yeah, I feel somewhat bad that I laced those letters with arsenic or whatever. I do treasure them. Like literally, if there was an explosion on my street right now, which is something that apparently happens all the time now, that'd be the only thing I would grab would be those Steve Ditko letters, and then I'd book it.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, those arsenic letters. That's pretty cool. But by the way,
tried to poison you back, but you didn't know that you had trained yourself to be immune to arsenic.
Yeah.
He was like, one of these days, he's just gonna not write me back, but he keeps writing me back. It's not working.
He's like, still alive.
Yeah.
but yeah, guys, as far as like regarding artists and their work and whatnot, like where do you get to the point where you don't like the artist or their work? Like say if that artist is a criminal, like a murderer, or the work is actually plagiarized. Like, are you still a fan of them after all that stuff?
I think that's it's a very multifaceted thought process that you go on a case by case basis with each artist. I mean, we literally talked about this on the Hergé episode towards the end. And I guess ultimately, I mean, my answer is I don't know, because it really just depends. I think that there's a lot of different factors and variables that come into play when you're making these evaluations of different types of artists, because there are certain artists like the ones we've been talking about, the Michael Jacksons and the R. Kellys and even the Roman Polanskis of the world and the Woody Allens, who have they have varying degrees of definitive proof that they've done these things, or varying degrees of like a gray area of like conjecture of like maybe this happened, and it seems like it's pretty certain that it did happen, but there's no like concrete evidence. They haven't been charged with anything. But no matter what has happened with them, whether they've actually literally been charged with a crime or whether it's just very commonly believed that this thing happened, they've experienced these sort of like modern public reckonings that have existed in the cultural zeitgeist of our generation.
Yeah.
And then there are other artists who have done the same or worse things, but they were outed for them in an older time when it wasn't regarded as big of a deal to that culture. So somebody like I'll come up with an example. So there's a lot of celebrities, actors, musicians who have sort of been in recent years, in the last whatever 5 years since in the age of Me Too, in the age of people speaking out about things that have happened to them and holding powerful people accountable for crimes and other indiscretions that they've committed, whether it be recently or in the past. So we have all these people who like currently we're like, fuck those people. And this argument is not to say like, oh, well, that's wrong. Like it's not about whether or not they're innocent or whether they should be ostracized from society. But there are people in the past who have done similar things and they've been caught for it and they've been outed for it, but it just happened in a different time where people didn't care as much. Like for instance, and I hope I don't ruin something for somebody out there, or maybe I do hope, I don't know. But Jeffrey Jones is an actor. He was the principal from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he was the dad in Beetlejuice, amongst many other roles. Wow. He was in Howard the Duck. He's a pedophile. He was caught for
child porn.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
But he was caught years ago. He was caught in like the early 2010s, or maybe even earlier than that. And that happened. And at that time, culturally, we just weren't as focused on that. I mean, obviously, people have always hated pedophiles. That's not like a thing where it used to be okay and everyone was fine with it. But I think we just, as a culture, we didn't focus on it as much, and we didn't have the same cultural viewpoint that we had on people getting caught for those things. I don't think that people thought about as much like how that interacted with the work that they did. And it's also been years ago, so it's kind of come and gone and people have forgotten about it. So you don't see people being like, I'm never watching Beetlejuice again because Jeffrey Jones. And it's I'm not saying that is right or wrong, or that it's hypocritical that people would care about one thing and not the other. But what I am saying is that it's contextual. There's a lot of different variables that include time, how much time has passed, where society was at the time, where culture was at the time, whenever the thing was brought to light. Even down to like whether or not they were an actor or a director, because like a director or like the star, like like directors of movies and like stars of movies, they feel more like they're like the owner of the thing that they're in. So even though Kevin Spacey was just an actor in a show that he didn't write and he didn't create, and there was many other actors, people wanted that show to be canceled because he felt like the brand, the guy. Yeah, it was like that was his show. Yeah. It was his product. Whereas maybe if some like the Jussie Smollett thing, when that happened, it was just like, oh, just kick him off the show. Like they're gonna cancel Empire because he was a supporting character. He didn't feel like the main guy. Maybe if something happened with Terrence Howard, which I think there is something about Terrence Howard. I think he's been accused of domestic abuse or something like that. But if that came out and became a huge thing, maybe then Empire would be canceled. But
it would have been a lot different.
Yeah. So it's I maybe I'm kind of like going over a lot of things and rambling, but my ultimate my ultimate thing is like, at least for me, there's a lot of different variables, and it makes it to where you really have to assess these things on a case-by-case basis, or at least I do. I don't have any blanket rules for how I separate the art from the artist, or whatever you want to call it.
Right. And also like Andrew, like holding people accountable and the times and being able to have like the internet in general makes a great way to have like a blueprint of somebody and everything that they've done. Like it's easy to hold a track record for people, like, because whatever they did is plastered all over Reddit, Instagram, what have you, and it's a lot easier to catch people in all their stuff.
Yeah.
And conversely, it's also easier to pick out the 3 mistakes that somebody's made over their life and then hold that up as like, look at what a terrible person this is, like that's the weirdest part about living in the time that we live in right now, is the fact that everything is codified and everything does have a record. And what was cutting edge humor in air quotes in 2007 is like way not appropriate now, which I think is a good thing. That means that our culture is moving forward, and that means that hopefully the people that were making those jokes on Twitter at that point in time have learned and grown as people, because that's what we should all want. But it's also, are the things they said then, in air quotes, a cancelable offense? Sometimes I think probably yeah, and sometimes I think no, that was a fucking person just being an idiot in 2007. Like it's a very strange, brave new world that we're all trying to navigate.
No, it definitely is. And what you said, that makes, it makes a lot of sense. Certainly now, you have to more so watch what you say, because there's a lot more people that care. They care about this sort of thing now. Like me and Joshua, we were actually talking about Louis C.K. earlier today. And, besides what he did, just his brand of comedy, period, like would not work. Like, I mean, just like at all. Like, what he talked about is just like it's in the, I guess, the era that we're in right now, where you can get canceled and stuff like that. It's just like, no. And I wonder like how that affects a lot of comedians now with what they can put out. And certainly we see it on shows like Saturday Night Live and all that kind of stuff. It seems like a lot more tame than it used to be.
Yeah, I don't know that that's my perspective on it. I think my perspective on it is that I think our culture is moving in a direction where people hopefully are viewing people who punch down as bullies. And I think that a lot of an old school, quite frankly, white comedy perspective on things is usually to punch down. The idea is that a lot of times, I'm a comedian, so I have to point out the truth and look at my hot takes is like, and it's like a lot of times I think it's being malicious or mean or pointing out weakness as a means of buoying the self and making the comedian look strong, where I hope that we're moving in a direction, culturally speaking, where we will exalt people who are inclusive and kind and can still be funny and make observations about our flaws and our weaknesses and our attempted triumphs, but not do it in a way that's just like, you're different and that's bad. Like a lot of comedy from the side of things that's like, oh, the PC police are out to get me. It's like, no, bro, you just fucking suck at your job. That's what it is. But that's just my perspective on it.
No, I understand that. No, definitely 100%. I know. I guess I kind of get a little sense of how y'all feel about it, but certainly one thing that I think it kind of talent merits it a little bit. And for me as a hip hop fan, you know, I'm just like, one thing that people really cared about was like, or at least used to anyway, was that, hey, you know, if you're a rapper and I want to deal with your content and I want to give you the props of being a rapper, I need to know that you write your own stuff. And apparently, you know, Drake is killing it right now, and everybody knows he doesn't write his own stuff. So it's just like,
yeah.
Hey, bro, you ain't have to call Drake.
Everybody calls Drake out, man. It's, you know,
I mean, I think
that's
that's really fascinating though, because I think, you know, I like Drake to a certain degree, and and I also think it's really interesting that because of the lineage of hip hop and because of the nature of the fact that for so long it was branded as, you know, the authenticity is really what you're selling, the story is what you're selling, you know, person that came up from, you know, rough background A and now lives in giant apartment B, and, you know, they have all this money and the story that they've kind of, the kayfabe of the arc of their life, right? Like, and for somebody like Drake, who broke the mold in the beginning as not being hard in any way, rapping about like, oh man, I'm on Instagram and I'm jerking off to you as you're like posing with your new boyfriend. Oh, life is so hard. Like, you know what I mean? Like his cultural presence has always been completely different. And I think it's fascinating that he won't admit, I mean, he kind of has, because he did that one episode with Zayn, what's his face, where they're like, you know, the reference track, did you write on top of that? Was that you? How did that work? And he was just like, you can listen to the reference track and make up your own mind. And I think it's really interesting that people still want that from him. And, you know, I feel like obviously a shitload of people don't care, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I think that there's space for both, probably, because at this point Drake is more of a pop star than he is, you know, an actual rapper. I mean, he literally is a rapper, but you know what I mean. He's a cultural force, in the same way that like Madonna is a singer, but she's really Madonna. She's a cultural, you know, figure. She's a pop celebrity that the way that they connect to the public and stay relevant is through music, as opposed to someone whose primary their cultural primacy is based on the music. You know, does that make sense, the distinction that I'm making?
Yeah.
Oh no, definitely. Because it's like when you hear it's the same thing, you know. It's like when you hear Madonna, you're just like, oh yeah, that's just Madonna, that's her job, she is Madonna. And it's the same thing for, you know, Drake. It's like you already know that's his brand. You know what you're going to get when you come to the table. And he's certainly made, or I guess cut out that little area for himself, because I was actually talking about that in my last podcast. Like, besides, you know, whoever's writing lyrics, as far as being revolutionary for hip hop in general, yeah, he spearheaded that thing of, you know, I won't say it as, you know, as harshly as Dave, but just making it okay for guys to be like, you know, instead of everybody's, you know, being stupid, misogynistic, and I got big cars, big wheels, blah, 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 instead of just being like, hey, you know, you hurt my feelings and I'm upset about that. Or, you know, I like you and you don't like me back. Why? Return my text message. You know, making songs about stuff like that.
Or, you know, making songs trying to pretend like his son that he kept secret was that was for the son's benefit. You know, that was to keep him away from the world so that no one else would, you know, kind of pry. Yeah, that's totally. I mean, I don't know why I'm going after Drake so hard. I like Drake, but it's still I think the inconsistencies in character in all of us are fascinating. I'm sure I have many, you know, as do we all. And I think the gaps between our personal logic and our existing kind of credos that we attempt to foist upon the world as our call to arms are very, very fascinating to me. Because because we're all human. Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
Everybody's gonna be a dipshit at some point. But it's interesting to me when you're trying to be more and falling short. That to me is way more interesting than somebody who just appears like they're winning all the time. Like The Rock is cool, and I love that he exists. But also, I would much rather talk about Lazaro Haas for hours.
I mean, yeah, because the imperfection and the fact that you see he's trying is there. It's like The Rock is just like, he just is, and everything he touches turns to gold. So it's just like, at the end of the day, it becomes like the same conversation is not interesting to talk about, you know?
Yeah.
And you guys mentioned something a little earlier, please, because I know kind of what it means, but for all of our viewers out there and our listeners, please define kayfabe. Like, I didn't know of that word until I started listening to you guys. Like, what is kayfabe?
Andrew, do you want to take it or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Kayfabe is a fake made-up word that describes the kind of code of silence and secrecy surrounding the wrestling industry. There used to be a time period where people didn't know that wrestling wasn't, in air quotes, real. And so the art and practice of keeping the industry secrets private and presenting the wrestling matches as real and the characters as who the people really were was called kayfabe. And Andrew and I used to work on a wrestling show, and Andrew and I, as we've said, are kind of interested in the ideas of the self and the perpetuation of identity and the intersection between that and public life. And what word is there really to describe that better than kayfabe? Because it applies to a lot of existence, because honestly, everybody here has some cultivated persona. When the lights go out and you're staring at the ceiling fan and just, the little cockroaches are skimming around your apartment, you're a different person than you are on this Zoom call right now with all of us talking about interesting conversations. We all at some point or another are playing a character, even if that character is, even if I'm playing the character Dave Baker, who was a very successful child actor who then broke away from that and became a cartoonist. It's still a character at the end of the day. And it takes, you never really know somebody is basically what it boils down to.
Yeah. And, we've gotten varying degrees of grief and criticism for the overuse of that word, sometimes jokingly and sometimes actual people being like, stop saying kayfabe and leaving 1-star reviews on our podcast page.
Ow.
Which I find interesting when somebody. Well, I find it more interesting when somebody gives us like an okay review, like a 4-star review or a 3-star review, and they're like, "I like the show, but I hate that they do this, this, and this. I hate that they say kayfabe so much." And I find that interesting because, number one, to me at least, it's like, have you never heard of a catchphrase? Like, have you never watched any other show or movie or listened to a podcast where they had a catchphrase that they used a lot? Like, how are you not familiar with this concept? But also, secondarily, it's interesting to me because, as we sort of discovered over time, episode to episode, it wasn't intended to start out like this. It's just kind of how we naturally fell into it. I mean, originally the show was just supposed to be explainers of stories that people had never heard before. I mean, the first episode of Deep Cuts is a perfect pilot episode for what the show is supposed to be, which is, you've heard of Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. It's like this thing, whether you are a fan of it or not, it's just this thing that exists in the periphery of your pop cultural consciousness. But did you know that the writers of those books don't exist, and it was actually written by one guy and a bunch of ghostwriters who had this like scheme where he like exploited these freelance writers to make money off of these books by cranking them out? Like, that was the concept of the show. But we discovered episode to episode and felt it out. And honestly, it was there from episode 1. I just don't think we consciously were aware of it. But that is the whole premise of the show. The premise of the show is exploring the kayfabe of the self. through the lens of all of these interesting people who have done these crazy things, at the end of the day, it all comes back to our extreme fascination with the characters that we play for ourselves and for others, the things that we tell other people, the things that we tell ourselves, the way that we salve our own anxieties, the way that we ingratiate ourselves with other people and get people to like us, the way that we find success. It's all about this code switching of the self, which is kayfabe.
Well, do you think that that's like, because I know how, like you said, code switching or just trying to be relatable, not something that's forced, but just trying to be like, okay, when I meet somebody new, what are you into? And like, how can I try to correlate that with something I'm into to just try to find some common ground, just how you meet somebody. But for like people on social media and people that are celebrity and their brand is their self, do you think that's something that just comes with that job, or just comes with being in the public eye? The act of kayfabe, that's just something that's going to be there, and it kind of has to be in order for them to sell themselves, basically.
It's interesting though the way that you phrased it, because we've all just become so accustomed to the idea that people have brands. Like, that's how weird and dystopian existence is now, that every human being that is attempting to do something in the public eye, we just understand that they're going to have a, in air quotes, brand, a few key identifiable aspects of their personality or their job that we can latch onto, and that can be commodified, and we can consume, and we can give them money for that privilege of consuming their brand. And that is so bizarre, because maybe in the last, 30, 40 years, that's really started. I mean, obviously celebrity has existed for a long time, but that specific understanding, like nobody go in the 1950s or 60s went to, a Clark Gable movie and were like, oh, I'm going to follow him on Twitter so I can see what he's cooking tomorrow morning, because I bet it'll be the same regal type of, accent that he's doing in this movie, or what, do you know what I'm saying? Like it's a very specifically commodified experience that only exists very recently in our cultural history. And, at this point, everybody knows, whether or not you know the word kayfabe, everybody knows that Charlize Theron, when she's doing promotional tour for her new movie, is not being Charlize Theron when she's at home with her kids. Right. Like, she's in sales mode. She's trying to appear likable. She's trying to tell fun stories. And whether she's succeeding or not succeeding in that endeavor, we all know that those interviews are stealth commercials. You know what I mean? Like, this right now is a stealth commercial. You guys liked what we did, and we were like, cool, we can all talk. And, obviously, Chad, you're in the group, so we talk on the internet a little bit. But this is a very small scale kayfabe in and of itself, We're all here talking about this thing that we made, and Andrew and I are here, cynically trying to be likable and doing the song and dance routine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sort of joking, but also sort of not. You know what I mean?
What you mean? Yeah. Honestly, no, I get it. I mean, because you can't. And you said it so perfectly. Like, that's completely true. Like, and when you say it, it seems like, well, dang, okay, but that's the truth. It's like if people went around and blatantly just like didn't care and just said what they felt, whatever comes out, like in a job interview. You know what I'm saying? Like, you come out and like, why do you want to work here? And then they expect you to tell them, well, I love this company ever since I was a baby. No, I'm here because I want to make money. But
I have to pay rent. I don't give a shit about whatever this company is. Right. I need to pay rent.
And that's basically it right there. And that's kind of how everybody has to operate, really. Because if it wasn't for that, it'd be a bunch of people that I wouldn't want to be friends with, wouldn't want to, cooperate or cohabitate with anybody,
And that's kind of the like bizarre crucible that people who have a life online have to endure now, is they have to simultaneously express genuine enthusiasm and excitement about things, and also maintain a cultivated image. And I'm not saying that this is something I think about all the time, because quite frankly, I don't. But there is a component of that where I'm not in a position where I really need to worry about that. If I was fucking like the star of some, if Andrew and I decided to get back into acting and they made Bacon and Legs The Wonder Years 2.0 or whatever the next title after Miami Nights, because
Bacon and Legs H2O 20 years later.
Yeah, Bacon and Legs H2O 20 years later. If they really wanted to reboot that and they wanted to bring us back in a meaningful way, I would be open to that discussion. But it's also interesting because that would be a much wider spotlight and require different things of both of us in terms of this conversation, because we'd be the face of an actual brand as opposed to a personal brand. A personal brand only has a circumference of a couple, rings of people out, right? A massive brand, like if they cast me as Wolverine in the new MCU movie, which isn't going to happen, but also I am literally Wolverine's height. So you never know.
I can see it.
That's a much different experience, and one where I'll probably have to scrub my Twitter of a bunch of "fuck Stan Lee" tweets.
No, and you guys ruined Stan Lee for me, by the way. Like I'm not.
We haven't even done the Stan Lee episode.
Man, you guys look because I was just like, I'm not crazy. I didn't think that he created every superhero ever. Well, I did when I was like 12, but I thought for the most part, because him and Spider-Man are so synonymous with one another, that he was that guy. Like, I didn't know that he, didn't really have as much to do with the character as I thought previously. Like,
right.
I've told this story so many times, it might even be true.
And
that fucking guy, man. But yeah, I mean, look, I love Marvel Comics. I love comics in general, but Marvel Comics, I have so many of them and love their characters so dearly. Yeah. And I love characters that Stan co-created with other people. The main point being that Stan co-created a lot of them, and honestly probably doesn't even deserve co-creator credit on a lot of them. Because the way the Marvel method worked is Stan came up with a name and then like a paragraph of what would happen. And I'm sorry, but that's not creating something. Like, creation is execution dependent. Like, you can't copyright a paragraph and a name, because anybody can create that in a, we could say Bacon and Legs H2O 20 years later is the new movie that stars the two of us, and it's about us going on a road trip, and then at the end of it we fight the Statue of Liberty, and then halfway through the fight we realize that the Statue of Liberty is being controlled by Chad, who is doing it to get back at us for a perceived social slight on a Zoom call 2 years prior. That is not an entire movie. Yeah. That is just not an entire movie. And if you brought that,
Brown plays.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like that is not an entire movie. And if you took that summary to the Writers Guild and asked them if I should get a writer or story credit based off of that, they would say no, and they would laugh me out of the building. But because there's no union in comics, because the industry was founded by fucking gangsters in the 30s, like, nobody gets protected, so Stan could do whatever he wanted. And he was the nephew of Martin Goodman, the guy who owned Marvel Comics in the original, in its original state. And so he just put his name on everything. Like, he literally, if you look at old Millie the Model comics, which are, they started in the 50s, and they're what they sound like. They're comics aimed at young girls, and they're about it's like a slice of life romance comic about this young model named Millie. The only signature on those pages is Stan Lee. Stan doesn't draw, he doesn't ink, he doesn't letter. All he did was put some words in some word balloons sometimes, and sometimes he didn't even do that, because all of the writers that he would work with in the Marvel style would write dialogue suggestions along the panel borders of the panels of the pages. So like, this blew my mind. There was an exhibit of Kirby original pages at, I think, CSUN, some school out in the valley in California, and I was like, Kirby originals, hell yeah, let's go. So I went out there, and I knew that Stan wasn't involved in the way that a lot of people think he was involved, but I didn't understand the length to which the Marvel method is just complete bullshit, because they had the page from Fantastic Four 52, 53, the one where it's the first appearance of Galactus, where Galactus shows up at the end and he's got his arm outstretched and the word balloon says, "Behold, I am Galactus, devourer of worlds." And on the corner of the page, you can still see Jack's original dialogue notes, and it was literally like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was, "Hello, I'm Galactus. I'm here to eat your world." And all Stan did was change "hello" to "behold," and "I'm here to eat your world" to "devourer of worlds." Like it's that minimal. Now, does that downplay his artistic contributions over the whole life of the comic? Maybe. I mean, there are times where he changed things in a very specific direction that only Stan would do. Obviously, he wrote dialogue for artists that weren't Jack. But saying that he's the Walt Disney or whatever is just so like, oh, you just don't know. You don't understand. And the fact that he's in all these Marvel movies it just makes this whole thing even worse. The only reason he's in those movies is because he got a settlement from Sony in the early 2000s after the first Spider-Man movie came out, and part of the settlement was that he would appear as a cameo in every Marvel movie created after that. So people see him in these movies and they think, oh, that's Stan Lee. He's the guy who created whoever, Groot, because he's in Guardians of the Galaxy. And actually he was involved in Groot, but he didn't create any of the other characters. He literally had nothing to do with Rocket Raccoon. That was Bill Mantlo. Like, he had nothing to do with Star-Lord. That was Jim Starlin. He had nothing to do with Gamera, also Jim Starlin. Like, because he had this contract in place before the MCU existed, he was able to kind of like osmosisly soak up credit for creating everything. And because most people don't give a shit about comics as an art form in the US, like, he just became the guy that created it all.
Yeah, and it's just that perpetuated kind of like association with that character, just like you brought up, like Walt Disney, like, and he was somewhat of an artist, but when I looked at him and saw that he wasn't even that great of an artist, and technically wasn't solely involved in creating Mickey Mouse and things like that.
Iwerks. It's a very similar story. Jack Kirby created all of Marvel, and Iwerks basically created all of Disney. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff is it's wild to me. It's like, wow, but nobody says that, and it's that question, is that am I allowed to have rights over something if I just blurted out a name like, oh yeah, Spider-Man, that's cool, but I didn't put any other contribution besides saying that. That's just my thing. So yeah.
What were you gonna say, Chad?
Oh no, you're good, man.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like if enough people say something, it'll eventually become true.
Totally.
It's the word of mouth. It's crazy.
Yeah, we
100%.
We talk about that a lot, and we'll talk about that more and more as episodes go on, and some of the episodes we're going to do upcoming that deal with conspiracy theories and some of the stuff going on in the modern day of people crafting realities, chaos magic and self-created realities is not only very fascinating, but it's also, at least to me, it's very real and it's happening all the time. And the Stan Lee thing is a good example of that, of this idea of, I mean, it's everything that we're talking about. It's the kayfabe thing where Stan Lee, his kayfabe is that he is this creator of all things, and he was able to exist in this very specific pocket, this specific vacuum where he could get away with that because the stuff was all created during a time when he had carte blanche to just take credit for things, because there was, the union didn't exist, and there was no protections for these artists and these even the writers, and they didn't put names on things, so there was a lot of gray area of like who did create things, to the point where like it just becomes a he said she said thing, where it's like everybody's just claiming that they created things, and it's like, who do you believe? And in Stan Lee's case, a lot of people believe him because he's the bigger celebrity or whatever. And then the second part of that is almost this reactive kayfabe, where then you have the fans where they start crafting their own realities to supplement and validate that reality. And then it just becomes a snowball effect, where you have people who become convinced that Stan Lee did create and draw Spider-Man, and you can't convince them otherwise.
Right.
You can't show them anything to convince them that that's not true. It's not factually correct. They've created this, and they'll even make up fake facts to support that. I remember there was just this person posting in some Facebook group, some Marvel Facebook group, where they were talking about how good of a character Thanos was in Infinity War and Endgame, and how he was like the best villain and all this stuff. And somebody posted and they said something like, oh, well, Stan was still alive at that point, and he was still on set, and he was actively, helping them steer the character and giving input. And that's not true at all. Like, none of that is true.
Wow.
Stan Lee gave no creative input on any Marvel movie. He just did the cameos. He literally, as Dave said, as part of a contractual obligation. I'm sure a lot of those filmmakers were probably just like, I'm sure some of them were probably like, oh, it's great. I respect you so much. But some of them were probably just like, this guy's just here. Get him off the set. But he had no creative input in these movies whatsoever. And this person just made up in their head this fake fact that he was on set on Infinity War and Endgame giving input on Thanos, the character that he did not create and he had nothing to do with. And in fact, he wasn't even working at Marvel anymore whenever Thanos was created. But they've made up this thing that and it just furthers the lie and makes it, and then eventually it's true. And that's the thing about crafting a reality or mass delusions or this idea of group kayfabe is at a certain point it kind of becomes true. If everybody agrees that something is real, then it kind of is then.
Yeah.
The question I have is, would that term be group fabe or K group? Kerub.
Definitely group fade.
Yeah, group fade.
Definitely.
I
like their winner.
You couldn't even really
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, but more on group fave and just crafting your own realities and stuff. Now, as far as this subject is concerned, I think some of it might be true, but how do you guys feel about the conspiracy of aliens?
You mean that they are here on Earth, or just that they're the conspiracy theory about them in general, or?
But yeah, just in general, the whole archetype of they're gray and they fly saucers and their planes look like plates and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, Andrew's from there, so I feel like he should take that one.
Yeah, I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. That's where I was born, and obviously super inundated with alien lore, and aliens are a big thing in Roswell. Kind of the thing that Roswell has going for it. The public perception of Roswell is it's the alien place, but in reality, Roswell is just a tiny nothing town. And aliens is a thing that everybody, there's an alien museum. Every restaurant is alien themed. There's a bunch of alien gift shops and a bunch of people that do tours and all this stuff. So I've been inundated with that since I was a kid. And I also, it wasn't a thing where I got sick of it or whatever. I loved alien stuff. I've always been super into conspiracy theories and specifically alien lore and paranormal lore. And I guess my thought on it is, I think all of it is fake. Not fake, but I think all of it is not real. I think every instance of people experiencing abductions or seeing flying saucers, I personally think there's probably a rational explanation for every single piece of it, and it's just this. It's people that just saw something that they didn't understand because it was an experimental aircraft that hadn't been released to the public, and we know that the government behind the scenes, their technology is 20 years ahead of anything that we have currently on the market. It's just a lot of examples of things like that. However, I think that aliens must actually exist, because it just seems astronomically unlikely that we are just the only planet in the entire universe that had the conditions for life to exist. So I think that aliens do exist, but I don't think that any of the actual like alien experiences or stories that we've created on Earth are real. And I don't think any of them, I think all of them have rational explanations, but it's also very fun to wade into that stuff and sort of the kayfabe of pretending like you believe in it, which is the thing that I've always done.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same. For me, I agree with that. I just think, like you, that of course we can't be, the only planet in the known and unknown universe that can support life. It just can't be. But other than that, I think the perpetuated thought of what an alien looks like, and spacecrafts and probing and abductions, and it was kind of ruined for me watching the History Channel, because everything that is ever made, like, that's really crazy, how did the Egyptians make that? Oh, it was aliens. Or they say, what was it?
Really, Chad?
What was it? Mermaid.
You went there, Chad.
I went there.
That is there. That is what they did.
You know how much I love Ancient Aliens.
Ancient Aliens. I can't.
That's what they did the whole show, man.
Yeah, shout out to Ancient Aliens.
Either aliens or mermaids, and it just kind of ruined it for me, because everything is an alien. It's like, a shoe on the ground. How did that happen? Aliens. It's just like, come on. I mean,
yeah,
but
it gets a little weird.
It definitely gets a little odd, but yeah. So just that, just like the way pop culture and movies and horror, the way aliens are depicted. No, I definitely agree with you, Andrew. I don't believe that happened. So definitely. But I kind of wanted to know a little more about you guys, since we were on the topic of comics. I want to know, because both of you guys have comic books. I know, Andrew, you have DeadBolt, AI, Private Eye, and David, you have Fuck Off Squad and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to know, like, how did you guys get into that field?
I'll go first because mine's a little shorter. Dave is definitely more inundated in the indie comics world. For me, I was never really into a lot of mainstream comics at all at any point in my life. I just never got into superhero comics when I was a kid, and we talked about that on maybe the Steve Ditko episode.
No, it was the Century one where you were like, oh yeah, we had fucking Wizard magazine at the video store.
Yeah. I never got into that because I think the reason why is because I just I didn't need it. I didn't need those comics in the same way that I think a lot of kids needed it, because I was always naturally like the biggest kid in my class, so I never got bullied. Maybe psychologically bullied, maybe made fun of, but I never got bullied in a way where I felt like going to school was like a threat, or that I never got beat up. I never got threatened to be beat up. So I don't think I ever needed that like power fantasy catharsis of imagining being this like all powerful hero in a way that I think that a lot of kids connected with superhero comics because of. I read weird comics, not that weird, but just weird for a young kid who would read comics, and it was basically like whatever was at this video store that I went to when I was growing up in Roswell. So when I was a kid, I'd read like Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics and Sonic the Hedgehog comics, because that's just what they had for whatever reason. And I read some manga as well. I read, they had Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z comics that they would sell. And then I just kind of moved away from comics. I as I got older, I never was really particularly into them in my adolescence and my teenage years. And I think I got back into them kind of in my later, like just out of high school. I sort of discovered indie comics and the fact that there was more than just mainstream superhero comics. I just, for the first time in my life, I discovered that they existed. And I think that was from like working at bookstores. I was just like, what is all this shit? Like the mainstream stuff, like Watchmen and Alan Moore and all that stuff. But then like specifically indie comics, like Daniel Klaus and stuff. And so I started reading those, and I'm by no means a huge comic connoisseur, but I really, at some point I just decided I wanted to make a comic. I wanted to make something in that medium because it's different than other types of mediums. I made a lot of short films and I wrote screenplays and I've done animations and all these different types of things, and making a comic just felt like a different medium to try out things in an experimental way that I hadn't done before. It's a different type of storytelling than making a movie that's 24 frames of images happening simultaneously to create like a continuous image from start to finish. The idea of how you have to like parse out storytelling in panels, and you can play with the way that panels are oriented to give different effects in the story was fascinating to me. So I basically just got in my mind that I wanted to make a comic. And so I wrote one and then I made it. I didn't draw it. Guillermo Villarreal, who's a Venezuelan artist, he drew it. But that's pretty much the story for me, as I just got it in my head. I think that happens. I consider myself less of like one specific thing. Like I don't consider myself a writer or a filmmaker or a comic book artist or a comic book creator or writer or anything like that. I just like making things, and I usually get very obsessed with one certain type of thing, and I just learn how to do it until I can kind of master it, and then I make the thing. And sometimes I stick with it. Sometimes I kind of move away. I got very interested in sculpting figurines at one point, and so I got really into learning how to sculpt and create the different body parts for action figures and how to mold them and cast them. And I did a handful of castings of mini action figures, and I kind of felt satisfied with what I did. And then I just was like, okay, I'm done with this. And I moved away from it. And now it's just kind of like a thing that I can do. And if I ever have a inkling to want to make more figures, I can do that. And comics was kind of that thing for me. That was a similar thing where I just wanted to make a comic. So I put a bunch of work into learning how to make a comic. I read a bunch of books and I read a bunch of comics to learn how the mechanics of it worked. And then I wrote one, and then I worked with an artist and had it made. And I want to make more comics in the future, but I definitely think of it as like an experiment in working within that medium.
Yeah, you definitely should going forward. I definitely like DeadBolt. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, you got yours? Did you get yours?
Yeah. I like the the hospital floor plan. I like that. That was funny.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you got it, because I just got a return to sender of another one that I had sent in August. Another Deep Cuts listener, they bought one and I sent it and I just got it back. Wow. All this time it didn't actually get to them. So I was
wow.
I'm sorry, this was supposed to go to you like several months ago, and it just didn't go for some reason.
Oh no. Well, yeah, definitely I received this. Yeah, man, definitely keep going in the future. Make more comics, like certainly.
Oh, yeah,
I agree.
definitely.
I agree.
Yeah.
What are you doing editing all these podcasts? Why would you do that, Andrew? Why don't you just make some more comics, man? Stop being so lazy. Come on now. Come on.
Mm-hmm. So what about you, Dave?
I've been publishing comics since I was probably about 15, 16. I have published roughly 12 graphic novels. My new books are I have a Star Trek series coming out through IDW on November 11th called Star Trek Voyager 7's Reckoning, which I actually got. I got the first issue of IDW, sent it to me this week.
Ooh,
it's pretty crazy to see old dirty Davy Bakes right there.
Nice.
Hey.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I'm the writer on this Star Trek comic right now, and then I have a creator-owned book starting.
Is that the first floppy you've ever written?
No, wait. What do you mean by that? Because
but haven't you pretty much? I mean, you did that mini Star Trek story, but is that the full? That's not the first full floppy you've ever written? I mean, everything you've done has been perfect bound, right?
No. I mean, I self-published shit when I was a kid that was all floppies that we then collected into trades, and and the first Fuck Off Squad book, it technically is perfect bound, but it's just a single issue's worth of story. It's like 20 pages or something. But yeah, so that book is coming out November 11th, and then I have Night Hunters, which is a dystopian cyberpunk comic published by Floating World, illustrated by Alexis Zirret, lettered by Robert Negretti, and written by me. Which is in the near future in Venezuela, there's a law that gets passed that if you want to run for public office, have a baby in a hospital, or rent an apartment, you have to have been or currently be a police officer. It's about two adopted brothers who end up on either sides of this law, one who becomes a cybernetic police officer and one who becomes a pro-human rights drug dealer. And it's about kind of the fulcrum of power that exists within this futuristic society and how these two characters interrelate to it. And
one of them has a dick on their arm.
One of them has a giant dick on his arm. Yes.
Oh, of course.
And then the books that most people probably already know me for would be Action Hospital, which is an ongoing series of comics that I write and co-illustrate, or Fuck Off Squad, which is a coming-of-age romance comic that I write and my partner Nicole Gu illustrates.
That's awesome. And I definitely love your art style, man. I see you've been working pretty hard on Mary Tyler Moore. Right?
Oh, baby. You don't even know how excited it makes me to hear someone that is not me and or Andrew say that stupid fucking name. But yeah, I'm
How did you
drawing.
come up with that? What is that?
I mean, as a brief aside,
like, what is that?
Before you continue on, Dave, as a brief aside, that's how I feel about bacon and legs. I'm just like, I can't believe people are saying that. I can't believe that we went on this podcast and like that was one of the first things you said. That is insane to me. Like, we were recording a podcast and I was just like, I made up a fake hypothetical where I was like, it was as if we had a show when we were, young called, I don't know, bacon and legs. Like, that is what that is. It was me creating a fake hypothetical to illustrate a point when we were doing the Bella Thorne episode. And I don't even remember what the point was, but I was making a point about something. And it's so insane to me that people
I hate that you broke kayfabe right now. I hate that you broke kayfabe. We met as children. On bacon and legs. Son of a bitch.
You ruined the whole thing.
The mask is off, guys.
Yeah, everybody knows now, man.
We broke the fourth wall.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't even remember what your question was. Something about comics. What was your question, Chad?
Oh no,
you like your art style for Mary Tyler.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm
reverse fangirling about it.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, I have dedicated many years to the art of illustration. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm excited for the book to be done. I'm inching towards completion on the art, and then I just have to letter this motherfucker, which will only take me, 6 months. I don't know. Anybody on this call want to letter some comics? No? You want a letter? All right, fuck it.
Hey man, we'll leave it up to the professionals.
Yeah, that's all you got.
That's pretty tough. I don't want to ruin your comic day. Like, Like I don't want to.
I feel like you're a smart guy. I feel like I could teach you. I feel like you'd be, open up a whole new world for you.
Hey, we'll see. We'll see. I'll definitely consider it. Definitely. But but look, guys, man, it's been such a pleasure having you guys on tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Likewise.
Definitely. Yeah. And we just we want you guys to definitely let all our listeners know, number one, where they can find you on social media, where they can buy your comics, all of that good stuff, your podcast. Let all of our viewers and listeners know where they can find you at.
Well, if you'd like to find me on the internet, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at xDaveBakerX, or my comics at heydavebaker.com. If you'd like to listen to our podcast, Deep Cuts, which is a podcast where Andrew and I pick a topic and then walk the listener through the ins and the outs and the nitty gritty so that they can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at their next forced social function. You can do that wherever you buy podcasts. Or you don't buy podcasts. Who the fuck buys podcasts? Where do you stream podcasts? Any Spotify, Apple Podcasts?
Oh, Dave. Yes, if you want to buy the podcast.
yeah. If you want to buy the podcast, just Venmo me $15.
There you go.
Yeah. And Andrew, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me in a local hospital grafting a 10-inch penis on my arm. And also, you can also find me at dapricerights.com, where you can get my aforementioned comic, DeadBolt AI Private Eye. And you can also get that link to Deep Cuts. And I will reiterate again that if you want to hear our deep dive explainer show, where we cover topics such as the fact that early 2000s rocker Andrew WK may or may not be a fictional person, or JJ Arms, the famous secret agent from the 70s, who's a man who has 2 hooks for hands and lives on a giant compound on a former zoo in El Paso, Texas, with a bunch of exotic animals, or our coverage of how Britney Spears is her life is being controlled by her father, and she's not allowed to do anything that she wants without getting a team of lawyers to approve of it.
Hashtag free Britney.
Yeah. Or our most recent episodes about the Flat Earth movement, where we examine how a conspiracy theory group like that is able to grow and flourish in a modern era of social media algorithms. Check out Deep Cuts. And as Dave said, you can find it on any podcast platform. Just search Deep Cuts. We're usually pretty much the first one that comes up at this point. The picture is of me and Dave wearing matching Hardy Boys sweaters, and Dave has a flashlight and I have a magnifying glass.
It's adorable. I'm just saying. It's very adorable.
Or you can go to deepcutspod.com, and that'll guarantee that you'll find the show.
Awesome. Well, yeah, guys, definitely for all of our listeners and our viewers out there, we will have all of their information in our description below. And please go out and listen to Deep Cuts. It is an awesome podcast. Like, trust me, I've listened to all of them up to this point. These guys they're pretty awesome, man. And hey, all you freaks and geeks out there, we are the Square Round Table. The Square Round Table podcast is brought to you by Science on a Postcard. Science on a Postcard is an online store that specializes in science-themed enamel badges, lanyards, environmentally friendly tote bags, notebooks, and lots more goodies that represent individuality and inclusivity in the scientific community. You could find all these wonderful products on scienceonapostcard.com. And for all our YouTube watchers out there, we will add their website and all their social media platforms in the description below. And now a word from our sponsors. The Square Roundtable podcast is brought to you by 2 Photon Art. 2 Photon is an art collective whose primary mission is to make science more accessible through science communication and art. Some of their art includes science-themed patches, jewelry, stickers, zines, and clothing, all of which contribute to the inclusivity, equality, and the overall advocacy for human rights in and out of the scientific community. You can find all of these wonderful pieces on 2photonart.com. And for all our YouTube viewers out there, we will add all of their website and social media info in the description below. Awesome, man. And yeah, as always, guys, it's time for my shameless promotion. Yeah. So you can find the Square Roundtable podcast on majorzonmusic.com every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Central time, and 1 p.m. Eastern time.
And you can find us on YouTube anytime at the Square Roundtable. At the Square Roundtable, and if you like it, comment and subscribe. We love hearing comments. Sure. Oh, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can get a notification of our new video.
Yes, hit that bell. And
one more thing, guys. Feel free to get your genitals grafted onto your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the new wave, man.
Yeah. See these long sleeves right now? You don't know how many dicks I got up in here.
Right, you got them all hanging.
Who knows?
Right.
It's like
definitely. You can catch all of us at your local hospital getting dicks grafted onto our arms. 12-inch.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, arm lift, man. The whole arm lift, man. Go big or go home, man. Go big or go home.
The whole arm. So yeah, guys, I would like everybody on this podcast, including our wonderful guests, to introduce themselves before we sign out. Once again, guys, my name is Chad Singleton.
Dmitri.
Josh Singleton.
Mark.
I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Andrew Price.
And this has been the Square Roundtable. Peace, guys.
Yeah.
We're out.
Bye.